Let's do a few questions based on vertical circular motion. So the important thing we saw is that in vertical circular motion, if the velocity of the particle at the lowest position, let's say starting the motion from here, right? So at this lowest position, if we give it a velocity of v naught, like this length is L for the string, right? So by the time it comes to a position like this, where theta is acute, let's say the speed has become v1 and this angle is theta. So we have the relation that v1 is equal to square root of v naught square minus 2gh from work energy, where h will be L into 1 minus cos theta. Right? So this is a standard thing that we should understand. And the other relation we'll have is that the forces acting will act in such a way that the centripetal force here will become tension minus mg cos theta. So that is why at this position, the tension, let's say T1, will be mg cos theta plus mv1 square by L. So that is why here the tension can't become zero. Even the speed becomes zero, but tension cannot become zero. So for an acute value of theta less than 90 degrees, okay, P1 may become zero. Okay, but T1 will not be zero. So there's no issue for the thread to become slack. Okay, but only if it is crossing. And of course, for V1 to become zero, the condition is that V0 should be less than root 2 GL. Right? Because if V0 is greater than root 2 GL, then it will definitely cross the 90 degree position. Okay, so now coming to that situation, if it crosses the 90 degree position and reaches somewhere here now. So let's say we are at this position, okay, where my new angle, let's say theta prime, it has become, so at some obtuse kind of angle. So for theta prime greater than 90 degrees, okay, so theta prime is equal to 180 minus beta. Now at such a position, what is happening? If the speed is suppose v2 and the tension at this point is T2, so you can see that now weight has a centripetal component. This angle is beta. So at this position, what is happening? That our v2 is again square root of v0 square minus 2g h prime, let's say, but h prime this time is equal to L into 1 plus cos beta. Okay, so your speed continues to decrease as we are going up. That is what work energy theorem is showing us, that potential energy is increasing, so kinetic energy continues to decrease all the way to the top. So minimum speed is at the top point if it reaches the top, it is. But tension also continues to decrease because now we have that T2 at this point is such that T2 plus mg cos beta is mg square by L. So T2 is becoming the centrifugal force. Okay, so that is mv2 square by L at this point minus mg cos beta. So because there's a minus sign in between the two now, so there's a critical condition at which the tension can become zero at such a point. And that critical condition is that the speed at the lowest point should be less than root 5 GL, then tension can become zero. Okay, so this one shows us that for V0 less than root 5 GL, but obviously greater than root 2 GR, because it has to cross that 90 degree position. So for this condition that V0 is greater than root 2 GL but less than root 5 GL, tension will become zero at some theta prime less than 180 degrees. Okay, but V2 will be non-zero at that point. So there the situation becomes, the string becomes slack. Thread slackens. Whereas of course we have the overall condition that if V0 is greater than equal to root 5 GL, then it completes vertical circular motion. Okay, and at the top, okay, the speed will be greater than equal to root GL and the tension will be greater than equal to zero. That is a critical condition. Okay, so this is the important set of values to remember. Root 2 GL as the critical condition to cross 90 degrees and root 5 GL. So yeah, and now, so this is clear now? Okay. Yeah, we did this, the recap of that concept. So now we'll look at few questions based on this. All right, so let's look at an example question or two. So now we have a slight variation of this situation. Instead of a particle attached to a thread, what we have is this kind of a situation. We have a circular track which is in the vertical plane. It's like a surface which is circular, and say it's basically a vertical semicircle like this. And this part is an inclined plane. Okay, so this is all a smooth track, okay, frictionless. And this part of the track is a smooth semicircle in the vertical plane. Of radius r. Now, given that r is equal to 10 meters, okay, and now what we are doing is we are releasing a particle from somewhere here. So a particle P is released from a position A like this over here, such that this A is at a height of h with respect to this point, which is the lowest point of the circular path B. And this part is, let's say, C, and this point is D. So what we have to do is, so particle P of, let's say, mass 1 kg is released from rest at the point E. So given the radius of that circular path is 10 meters, acceleration due to gravity is 10 meters per second square. So first is find the value of h if the particle P just reaches point C, and find the normal reaction as it just crosses the point B in this case. So that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question will take a value of h. So if h is equal to 20 meters, show that the particle loses contact at some point between C and D, and find this position where it loses contact. And third case is find the minimum value of h for the particle to reach D. So that is, if it has to reach the top point of the circular path. Okay, so just try out this question. Notice that this is a slightly different case of vertical circular motion in the sense that there's no thread attached, rather there's a track. But if you make the free body diagram of the particle while it is in contact at any point on the track, you'll see that normal reaction is playing the same role as tension. The normal reaction is going to act in the centripetal direction. जैसे tension act करता है, right? And because it's a frictionless surface, again our mechanical energy is conserved. Normal reaction will be always perpendicular to velocity, so it will not be doing work. So the sum of gravitational potential energy and kinetic energy will be conserved. That we can apply throughout. As the particle is sliding down the incline also, potential energy is converting to kinetic energy. And then as it starts on that circular path, kinetic again converts to potential. Right? Yes. So we come sliding down, we'll have the maximum speed at the point B. From there again it starts slowing down. And depending on how much height I've released from, I have a possible value of speed at B. Now, if the speed at B is comparatively large, it can reach the point T. But on the other hand, if it cannot reach, then there are two conditions possible. It can stop between B and C and then come back, slide down. Or it can lose contact with the surface between C and D. Because of that same kind of... Yes. Normal reaction will become zero. That is the condition for losing contact. Right? Just like in the previous case, tension was zero for the string to slacken. Yes, Adinath, your answer is correct. Good for the first part. Yes, root 2GH, that will be that much. So now the normal reaction at the point B. Oh, just a second. The radius is 10 meters now. Adinath, check your answer is not correct. Check your answer once. Manav, your answer is correct. Have you taken the radius to be 20 by mistake?
Yes, sir.
Ah, okay. Just change the radius to 10, now you will get the correct answer.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, Manav, your answer is correct for both things. Normal reaction also. Normal reaction in the first situation will become 3 times the weight. So 30 newtons. Okay, so if our particle is just reaching C, what is the critical condition? That when it reaches C, what should happen? Its speed should become 0. है ना? मतलब if its speed is 0 at C, so its speed is 0 anywhere below C. है ना? And B and C के बीच there is no issue of normal reaction becoming 0. ना? Normal reaction will be there because of mg cos theta component. So the critical condition is that the part, if it's just reaching C, the particle should just stop at C. Okay. So if the particle is just stopping at C, C minus C. But that should be equal to that radius. Half mv square here. And then again that half mv square is converted into. So it's as simple as that. So H needs to be how much? It needs to be exactly 10. So critical condition for C is that speed should be 0 at C if it is just reaching C but not going beyond. Yes, Shayan, your answer is also correct. So I'm just first putting up the answer, then I'll put up the explanation also. Okay. So H should be equal to 10 meters. Basically, H should be equal to R. Okay. And normal reaction at B, when you calculate, you will see it will become 30 newtons in this case. So basically, the critical condition for it to just reach C is that V should be equal to 0 at the point C. So that means kinetic energy should be 0 at C. Okay. So that means potential energy at C should be equal to potential energy at A, which means height of the point A should be equal to height of the point C with respect to B. So that's how we are getting this condition there. Yeah, Aryan, I'm just checking the second and third part answers also for people. Okay. So this part you have to find the position. So you just find the angular position at the point where it loses contact. Okay. Find theta at which n becomes 0. Be somewhere between B and C. Sorry, between B and D. Okay. For this part, you will see that H should be greater than equal to 5R by 2. Yes. Or H should be greater than equal to 25 meters. Correct. So Manav and Aryan, your answers are correct. Okay, now see in the second case, what we'll do is now we'll be able to show that if the speed at B is greater than root 2 GR, but less than root 5 GR, then we are getting that condition, because the critical condition to reach the point D again is that at the highest point D, there should be some contact. So if N is greater than 0 at D, then we want the speed at D to be greater than root GR. That we'll get from the free body diagram at D. So make an FBD at D, and if it's in contact, the normal reaction should be downwards. So N plus mg should be equal to mv square by r. So V should be greater than root GR at D. So from that you can back calculate. If at D पे the velocity is greater than root GR in magnitude, then at D, which is 2r below, the speed should be greater than root 5 GR. Yeah, I'll explain it. Okay. So that's how we'll do the second part. In the second part, we have to show that it's not reaching D. So first, let's find the critical condition for reaching D. So the critical condition for that particle to reach D is that it should be in contact with the surface. Because between B and D, sorry, between C and D, again there is again that issue that speed may not be 0, but the normal reaction might become 0. The FBD is like that. So if we make the FBD, so suppose we are releasing, sorry, if you are releasing it from somewhere here, okay, A, and then it has some speed at the point B, which is V naught, okay, and then it reaches some point here, let's say, with the speed V. So at a position like this, again, if we make the free body diagram, so for example, if this angle is beta, then mg has a cos beta component, and normal reaction should be like this. So again, at this point, the condition is that n plus mg cos beta is equal to mv square by r. No? So n is equal to mv square by r minus something. No? So if v reaches a critical value, which is square root of gr cos beta, then normal reaction can become 0. Okay. So between C and D, okay, if n becomes 0 at some position, because v is equal to root gr cos beta, okay, then the particle will fall. It will fall off. That is, it will lose contact with the surface. It will lose contact with that vertical track. Okay. So that is what we show will happen when h is equal to 20 meters. Okay. So on the other hand, if the particle reaches D, okay, the highest point, then the condition is that normal reaction should be greater than equal to 0 at D. Okay. So now you look at the free body diagram at D. What is that looking like? So if it reaches with some speed V over here, the free body diagram should be such that if it is in contact, there should be some normal reaction. So at the point D, n plus mg is equal to mv square by r. So n is equal to mv square by r minus mg. It's the same as this equation, but beta is 0 at that point. So the critical condition is that v should be greater than root gr, greater than equal to root gr at D for n to be greater than equal to 0. So now from that we can find the critical condition at B. The relation between B and D. Okay, so you can see that therefore this will tell us that V naught is greater than equal to root 5 GR. Because again, how is this V related with this V naught? It is related by work energy. Now the distance, the vertical displacement is 2r. So again, that relation is that because V square is equal to V is equal to square root of V naught square minus 2gh, and in this case h will be 2r. No? So when you substitute that, you'll see there's that relation. Oh, yes, yes. So basically we have v square is equal to v naught square minus 4gr. This is the condition that we have. Okay. So if v square is greater than equal to gr, that means v naught square should be greater than equal to 5gr. So that is the critical condition to reach the point D. Okay. Critical condition to reach D. Okay. And V naught itself is how much? Square root of 2gh from this side. E to B, if you see now, that is the work energy. Okay. So basically, H should be greater than equal to, or 2H should be greater than equal to 5R, or H should be greater than equal to 5 by 2R, or H should be greater than equal to 25 meters to reach the point D. So that gives me the answer to the third part also. And what is the minimum height from which I should drop it so that it reaches the point D? It's 25 meters. Okay. And obviously that's why for the second part, when H is only 20 meters, it's going to lose contact somewhere. So now we have to find the angle at which it's losing contact. Position. Yes, that's correct, Adina. Okay, so this condition is clear, na? Root 5 GR at the bottom. Root GR, because see, what is this condition coming from? N plus mg is equal to mv square by r. No, so if we want n to be greater than equal to 0, we want mv square by r to be greater than equal to mg. No, so v should be greater than equal to root GR.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, can you explain the at the topmost point?
Can I explain the FBD?
No, sir. The at D, ma'am, sir, from D.
At the point D, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so see the free body diagram of the particle at the point D. Now, if it is in contact with the surface, there should be a downward normal reaction acting on it, right?
Yes, sir.
So net force उस पे कितना हो जाएगा? N plus mg.
Sir.
And that net force is pointing towards the center. So it is the centripetal force, na? So it should be equal to mv square by r.
Sir.
Okay, so what is the condition for it to remain in contact at the top? N should be a positive quantity. That means N plus mg, which is mv square by r. So if N is a positive quantity, then definitely mv square by r should be greater than mg.
Yes, sir.
So in the limiting case, we can take just about greater than equal to also. So in the limiting case, what's happening? Mv square by r is just about equal to mg, right? So v is equal greater than equal to root gr. That is the condition for the particle to reach d. Because if that condition is not satisfied, na, that means normal reaction is negative at the top, which cannot be. So that means uske pehle kahin pe it has lost contact.
Okay, sir.
Understood, Anshul? Yeah.
Sir, H is not
Yes.
equal to 2R, na?
Which one?
Both of us. H is not equal to 2R, na?
No, h for which one? For the third part?
Yes, sir.
So see, for third part, it's written on the side. No? The critical condition is that at D, at the top point, V should be greater than root GR. So that will give me at the lowest point, that is B, V naught should be greater than root 5 GR, greater than equal to. Got it, no?
Yes.
अब उसको compare करो with the point A, है ना? So A पे जितना potential energy है, that is only converted to half mv naught square na, at the point B.
Yes, sir.
So when you apply the condition that mgh should be greater than equal to this thing, no, half mv naught square, where v naught is square root of 5 gr, you will get this condition which I have written over here, that 2h should be greater than 2h should be greater than equal to root 5, greater than equal to 5r. So that's how we will
Understood,
get
sir.
this condition. So this is to reach the point D. This is the critical condition to reach the point D. So this is now actually the answer to the third part. No? The critical condition to reach the point D. This is the answer to the last part of the question. Second part we still have to solve, because now in the second part you can see from this that the height which we are dropping it from is less than the critical value of 25. So that means it's going to lose contact somewhere between C and D. It's less than 25, but at the same time it's greater than 10. No? And previous first part we had seen that if we drop it from a height of 10, it reaches C. So obviously from 20 is going to cross C, but it's less than 25, so it's not going to reach D. So if it is stopping somewhere between C and D, it's not that it comes to rest, rather it loses contact, it falls off. So now let's find out that point where it loses contact. So couple of people have sent the correct answers. It will be, if you take the angle beta from the top vertical, it will be cos inverse of 2 by 3. Therefore, if you take the angular displacement from the lowest point, it will be the complement of that, 180 minus. So now let's work that out. So here, let me forget about the point D now. So I'm concentrating more on this point here. Now I want the condition that n should become 0 at this point. So if n is becoming 0 at some point like this, the condition is that mg cos beta at this point should be equal to mv square by r. That's my first equation. Okay. And you can see here that half mv square is equal to half mv naught square minus mg into this height. This height will become L, 1 plus cos beta. This kind of expression we get. And this half mv naught square is from the other side, how much? Mgh. Okay. So we have this relation now that half mv square is equal to mgh plus mgl, 1 plus cos beta. So this is our second equation. So solving the two equations,
Minus MGL.
sorry, minus, yeah. Minus. So solving equation 1 and 2, we can just compare the values of v square from equation 1 and 2. So from equation 1, v square, and sorry, this is not L, this is R. radius of that part. So that's this whole thing here. From here to here, this height is r into 1 plus cos beta. Okay. Right. So solving this too. So v square from the first equation is how much? Gr cos beta. And from the second equation, v square is equal to 2gh minus 2gr into 1 plus cos beta. Now this equation we have to solve for beta. No? This equation only we have to solve. So we'll get 3r cos beta is equal to 2h minus r. Something like this we'll get. Okay, this is correct. So now let's put the values. So 3 into 10 cos beta, beta is a known quantity, is equal to 2 into, now h we had put as the second partner, h we had put as 20 meters and r is of course 10 meters. Substituting these values, so you can see you are getting 30 cos beta is equal to 20. So beta is equal to cos inverse 2 by 3, which if I remember correctly is about 48 degrees, close to 48 degrees. Okay, so that means that is the position where it is going to lose contact. Or if you see the angular position from the lowest point, this theta. So that's about 132 approximately. So that's where it is. Okay. So you will find questions of this type in the work energy chapter of HCV towards that. So those questions need to be practiced out, because in HCV these questions are not there in the circular motion chapter. So circular motion comes before work by energy, and this is application of work energy. So circular motion chapter has questions only up to this thing, dynamics of circular motion, without going into vertical circular motion. But this is very important for JEE Advanced, especially almost every other year there are a couple of questions from vertical circular motion, because it checks your concepts of dynamics, work energy, conservation of mechanical energy, everything put together. So it's very important. Okay. So with this we conclude circular motion. Okay. You continue working on the questions, and over the next few weeks we'll solve doubts and questions also, especially next week, because you'll also have a test coming up later. Yeah. How did we get this second equation? Okay, second equation is coming better from work energy applied between, so see this equation. This equation is coming from what? We are applying conservation of energy from B to that particular point P somewhere here, where it is losing contact. So change in kinetic energy plus change in gravitational potential energy is 0. So change in kinetic energy is half mv square minus v naught square, and change in potential energy is plus mg, let's say h prime. So that h prime is this thing, h prime is r1 plus cos beta. So isko thoda rearrange karke likha hai that the kinetic energy at this point P is equal to the initial kinetic energy at B minus the loss in potential energy. Right. And then of course V naught we are substituting as root 2 change, because this kinetic energy now half mv naught square, this has come from the potential energy at the point A. Potential energy at A is equal to the kinetic energy at B, is coming from there. So half mv naught square is equal to this. Okay, so this is clear. And last part, so we have understood already that if we wanted to reach the point T, then obviously H has to be more than 20. But how much more? So we found the critical condition at T. So at B, the velocity needs to be greater than root 5 gr. So from that, okay. So with this, we conclude the vertical circular motion. Now we are moving on to the next part of our syllabus, next chapter, which is quite a big section. So it's called system of particles. And this chapter itself will be divided into quite a few sections. So the first section of system of particles we will concentrate on will be the position of center of mass of a system of particles. Okay. So there'll be various methods by which we will find the position of center of mass. But first of all, we'll define what is center of mass. Okay. So even before that, we will define what is a system of particles. I mean, obviously the name suggests that anything that consists of multiple particles, any system is called a system of particles. Okay. Now the particles can be rigidly connected to each other, like in the case of a rigid body, or they may not be, like in the case of a fluid or a gaseous medium, anything like that. But anything that consists of multiple particles is a system of particles. And therefore, in that sense, you can say that if you consider at an atomic level or at a microscopic level, there is no such thing as a single particle, because that every particle can be broken down into smaller particles. As of today, we might say that, okay, electron is an individual particle. It has not been broken down, or a Higgs boson, or a quark has not been broken. But we never know, like in future. Okay, so we are not really dealing with that right now. We are dealing with the macroscopic world, where we can treat tiny chunks of matter as particles, and anything that consists of multiple such particles becomes a system of particles. Okay. So now based on that, we'll see that there are different types of system of particles, how we can classify them. Let's understand that, particularly for the purpose of this chapter. So any system consisting of multiple particles. Okay. Is a system of particles. Okay, so the short form for it will be SOP from now. Okay. So could be like a solid rigid body. Okay, it could be a fluid in a container. It could be gas in a container. It could also be something like this. It could be a set of particles attached to each other by a massless or very light, basically, frame. So for example, we can have something like this. So these are all particles. M1, M2. But they are connected to each other rigidly by light but rigid rods. So this whole thing now constitutes a system which consists of multiple particles. Okay, so this is a system of particles. So these are all various different types of examples of system of particles. Okay. Okay, now for our particular purpose, which is basically understanding mechanics related to such a system of particles, how we would apply dynamics, how we would apply work energy theorem, things like that. So for that purpose, we will divide or classify these into two categories. Okay, actually we can classify into many other categories also, but here we will classify it for our purpose into two such categories. That one is called a discrete particle system, where the system consists of individual particles which are located at discrete or individual positions. And the other is a continuous mass distribution. That means the mass is continuously distributed, like in the case of a rigid body, or even the case of a fluid. Whereas the last example I've shown you, there are individual particles which are at individual positions. So they are like lumps of mass which are located at certain discrete positions. Discrete means individual or separate positions. So that is called a discrete particle system. Whereas the first few examples, like a rigid body or a fluid or a gas, the mass is not at individual locations, it's distributed, over a certain amount of space. So that is called a continuous mass distribution. So in real life, what we observe is more commonly continuous mass distribution, right? Unless we build something specifically like this one, which is a discrete particle system. Okay. So we have discrete particle systems. And we have continuous mass distributions. So in this, discrete or individual particles are located at individual positions. Whereas continuous mass distribution, the mass of the system has a continuous distribution over its volume or surface, okay, or length, depending on what type of system it is. For example, a thin rod, okay, or a thin disc, or a solid cylinder. So you can see in a thin rod, the mass is distributed over length. In a disc, it is distributed over surface. Whereas in a cylinder, it is distributed over volume. Okay. These are all examples of continuous distribution. Okay. Whereas a snooker table with snooker balls on it can be treated as a discrete system, because each snooker ball may be treated as a particle, because its own diameter is small compared to the size of the snooker ball, a snooker table. Okay. Snooker table, pool, or snooker, there's that game where you have individual balls like this and there are pockets at the corners, and then you strike these with a cue. not currently familiar with snooker championships, but India had one international champion called Geet Sethi. Yeah, yeah, it's an international sport, snooker. Yeah. There are actually 2 or 3 games related to this sport. One is billiards, one is snooker, and one is something else I'm forgetting. So there's a slight difference of rules between billiards and snooker, like how the point system and all works. Pool is the third game. Pool is the simplest of the games. Snooker and billiards have some more complicated rules. Like pools just has points for the different colors. No? You have to use a certain color ball to hit that other ball, and those kind of things. Or even a carom board, with the carom coins, you can treat it like a discrete particle system. Because compared to the size of the carom board, you can treat the coins like particles, because they're smaller. Okay, so this is discrete particle systems and continuous mass distribution. So these are the 2 classifications of system of particles we'll take for this chapter for mechanics. Okay, as I said, like it's a very general thing. Everything around us is a system of particles. Okay, so for example, we can have a system of particles where certain particles are orbiting a particle. In that context, like you can treat the atomic structure like a system of particles where electrons are actually in orbit around the nucleus. You can, in that context, you can even treat the solar system like a system of particles, because in context of a galaxy, the planets are of very small size. So even though the planets are actually huge compared to us, but in the reference frame of a galaxy or even larger of a collection of galaxies, the solar system itself is a tiny sort of system which is consisting of individual particles, and they are in that kind of situation that the solar system itself is in motion, and while it is in motion within the galaxy, the planets are in orbit around the certain star, and again the planets might have satellites of their own. So there are various different types of systems possible: stationary systems, moving systems. There are variable mass systems, like if you have gas in a tank which is leaking out, then the mass that you have inside the tank is a system of particles, but it does not have fixed mass. It's a variable mass system. Okay, so those are other types of systems also, but right now we will start with these 2 classifications. Okay, because right now our first purpose for system of particles is to define a certain position within the system, which is called the center of mass. Okay, now center of mass should not be confused with center of gravity, though interestingly both are the same in most cases. In most cases, what happens, unless we have some exceptional circumstances, any system that is lying on the surface of the earth, for example, any rigid body or any discrete particle of systems, wherever its center of mass will be, that will be the center of gravity. That is the point through which the effective gravitational force on the whole system is acting also. But center of gravity has a different definition. We will come back to that later. So here we will start by understanding the definition of center of mass, and henceforth we can refer to it as COM or even CM of a system of particles. So what is the simple word definition of center of mass? It is a symmetry point. it is such a point within the system about which we can say the mass is symmetrically distributed. Okay, but of course then we have to give some mathematical definition also. What do we mean by the symmetry? So we'll discuss about that. So center of mass is a geometrical point within a system of particles about which the mass of the system is symmetrically distributed. Okay, so at a very simple level, if we said that, for example, if we have a system of two identical particles, let's say A and B. Okay, and now let's say that I have denoted that system such that I have taken my x-axis as the axis joining the position of the two particles. So I have particle A over here, it's of mass m, and it is at some x coordinate, let's say x1. And I have particle B over here, it is also of mass m because it's identical and it's at some x coordinate x2. So logically, where is the center of mass? It can only be at one place, which is the midpoint, because they are two equal masses. So here the center of mass will be at the midpoint, because that is a symmetry point. Okay, so it will be here, and we can say that the coordinate of the center of mass will be x1 plus x2 by 2. So you can see it's a mean position. Okay. Now, if we extend this definition a little bit and say that instead of one particle, we have a collection of many particles, but they are all identical on the x-axis. So now logically tell me how will I calculate the position of the center of mass? Suppose I have n number of identical particles. Okay. So I have the particle, first one at x1, then second one at x2, then third one at x3. Like this, I have n number of particles. The last one at xn, they're of all identical mass. So where would the center of mass be? It would be at some kind of mean position. And how I would find that mean position? The center of mass in this case would be at the coordinate summation summation x divided by the number of particles. It would be at the mean position. So I going from 1 to n divided by the number. This would be the position of the center of mass in this case. Yes, exactly. So it would be the arithmetic mean position. But here, how come it is the arithmetic mean in these two examples, both in the two particle system and the n particle system? You can see it's the arithmetic mean because the particles are of identical mass. Okay. So what we are drawing as a conclusion here is that for a discrete particle system, of identical masses, okay, particles of identical mass, the position of the center of mass is the mean position. Okay. Okay, so this definition is clear so far, right? And these two examples, okay. Now, just for a minute, since I'm a fan of Geet Sethi, show you one. Yes, play by him. That guy is Geet Sethi, the guy in the blue shirt. He's going to put reverse spin. Amazing player. Like all these champions are like this only, but like okay. So let's get back to our lecture. You know, yeah. So we saw that if we have equal mass particles, then we can come up with a very simple formula for the position of center of mass. Especially if they are all lying on the x-axis, then it's just summation x divided by n. So that is like the mean of the x coordinate. Okay. Now, can we extend this to a three-dimensional system? If we have n particles of equal mass, but they're not on the x-axis, they are in the general three-dimensional space. So then we have to just use the same formula for the y and z coordinate also. So if we have a more general case, so in this they were on the x-axis. Now we have n identical particles. Okay. In general xyz space. Okay. So then with respect to that origin of our coordinate system, how we will identify the position of the center of mass, we will have to do this thing that if this is our coordinate frame, so we have all these particles. So they are all of mass m, but they are located at position x1, y1, z1, like this. This one is at x2, y2, z2, like that. We have n number of particles. So this is xn, yn, zn. So in this case, the center of mass will be some position like this. So x coordinate of the center of mass will be summation x divided by number of particles. Y coordinate will be similarly summation y divided by number of particles, and z coordinate will be summation z divided by number of particles. So we can also write this like a position vector. The position vector of the center of mass is summation of the position vector of individual particles divided by n. number of particles, where the position vector of any one particle is x I cap plus y j cap plus z k cap. So for example, the first particle's position is x1 I cap plus y1 j cap plus z1 k cap, and like that. Okay. So the position of the center of mass will become its x coordinate I cap plus its y coordinate j cap plus z coordinate. So again, this is showing us that for identical particles, the center of mass is the mean position, the arithmetic mean position of the individual position vectors. Okay, but obviously this is for a specific situation where we are dealing with identical mass particles. Okay, now next we'll see what happens if the masses of the particles are different. Okay, so this definition is clear. Okay, so this is now just a generalization of the earlier one where the particles were on the x-axis. Huh? Okay, now let's look at a situation where suppose we have only two particles, but they are not of equal mass. Okay, so suppose we were to have an example where let's take something specific. I have one particle which is of mass, let's say 5 kgs, and I have another particle which is of mass 15 kgs. So it's 3 times this. Okay. And the distance between these particles, this distance is, let us say, 12 meters. Okay. So where is the center of mass of this system, of this two particle system? Okay. So logically, one thing we can say is that will it be at the midpoint? Definitely not. Okay.
No.
Now which side of the midpoint it should be, left or right? It should be
Right.
towards the right, closer to M2. Okay, but then question is how much closer to M2? Okay, if the distance of the center of mass from M1 and M2 are suppose D1 and D2, then can we say that there's any ratio of D1 and D2? Yes, but D1 will be actually 3 times D2 because M2 is 3 times M1. Okay, so what happens here is that we can see that M1 is to M2. ये mass ratio कितना है? 1:3 है. So that means the center of mass should be now a point which divides the line joining the two of them in the inverse ratio. If this distance is D1, then this distance should be D2 such that D1 is to D2 should become 3:1 in this case. Or we can say that basically M1 D1 should be equal to M2 D. So you can see in this case that D1 will be 3/4 of that D. So 3/4 of 12 will be 9 meters. Okay. And D2 will therefore be 1/4. Okay. So it will be 3 meters. Right. So it's cutting it. Okay. So now how we can generalize this as a formula? So we can therefore say that if we have a two particle system and let's say both of them are lying on the x-axis. So in the general case, if I have a particle of mass m1 located at x equal to x1 and I have another particle of mass m2 located at x equal to x2, then the center of mass should be a point that divides these two in what ratio? It divides the line joining these two in the inverse ratio of mass. So if, for example, this particle is A and this particle is B, then the distance AC is to CB should be equal to inverse of the mass, M2 is to M1. Okay, so that means x coordinate of the center of mass will become what? It will become M1 x1 plus M2 x2 divided by M1 plus M2, like this. Right? Here we are just using that coordinate geometry formula that if this point is x1, this point is x2, and this point is dividing them in the ratio m is to n, then x will be m x2 plus n x1 divided by m plus n. Section formula, this is called in coordinate geometry. So I'm just making use of that over here. So now interpretation wise, if you see, what does this formula tell us? It is not the mean of x1, x2, it is the weighted mean, where the weightage is given to mass. So this, in effect, the position of the center of mass becomes the weighted mean position. It's a statistical term, right? Weighted mean. It is a weighted mean of x1 and x2. Okay, weightage is given to mass. Okay, so this becomes the general formula. Now we can generalize this in three-dimensional space also. Okay, so we'll just replace the x coordinate with the position vector. So our CM vector will become m1 r1 plus m2 r2 divided by m1 plus m2 for a two-particle system.
So can you scroll up for a second?
Yeah, sure. This part?
The green part.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, how
Yes.
did we get that the distance should be an inverse of mass?
Yes. So that is why it is m1 x1 plus m2 x2. No? Because AC is to CB is inverse of the mass ratio. M2 is to M1. Understood?
Sir,
No?
that's asking how, sir?
That is the meaning of weighted mean. No? That mass into distance on one side of the center of mass should be equal to mass into distance on the other side. Understood? No? So see, in the above example, you have the 5 kg particle and the 15 kg particle. So the 5 kg particle comes out at how much distance? 9 meters. And the 15 kg particle is at 3 meters. Why? Because mass into distance on either side is balanced. So 5 kg into 9 meters on one side is equal to 15 kg into 3 meters on the other side. Understood? No?
Yes, sir.
So that is the meaning of the term, that we are finding the weighted mean of the two particles m1 and m2, like of the position of the two particles. Okay, the distance between them is 12 meters, but their masses are in ratio 1:3. So the center of mass should divide the line between them in the ratio of distance 3:1. That is the inverse of the masses, so that mass into distance on each side is equal. So that way the center of mass becomes the symmetry point with respect to mass. Okay, so statistically the formula becomes that it becomes a weighted mean position. M1 x1 plus M2 x2 divided by M1 plus M2.
So this is internal division formula for straight line.
This is the
Internal division formula.
I think it's also called the section formula. No? if a point
Yes, sir.
divides 2 points in a ratio,
Section.
let's say m is to n like that. Okay, so in coordinate geometry, you can see you can find the coordinates of that point by using section formula. Okay, you can also actually just derive this formula this way, that here you can see that logically actually what we are implementing is this condition that the distance AC is to CB should be M2 is to M1. Okay, or you can say if this distance is D1 and this distance is D2, so basically D1 by D2 is equal to M2 by M1, because the condition we want is that M1 D1 should be equal to M2 D2, and that is the condition that we're looking for. Now you can see that in this is XCM minus X1 and this is X2 minus XCM, and that should be equal to M2 by M1. So if you solve this, you will get this relation that M1 X1 plus M2 X2. But instead of deriving it this way, we are just making use of section formula from coordinate geometry. So now when we generalize this for a n particle system in general 3-dimensional space, we get the overall formula which is applicable to any discrete particle system of any number of particles and any kind of distribution of mass. Okay, we get the general formula. So general formula for position of center of mass for a discrete particle system. Okay. So this can be applied to any situation, and all the symmetry cases are like special cases of this. Okay. So if with respect to some coordinate frame, rectangular coordinate frame or Cartesian coordinate frame, whose origin is this point. So I have various particles in my system, like particle M1. Now this one is at a defined position vector R1. Okay. Now I have another particle, let's say M2. And you have to imagine that this is 3-dimensional positioning. So they have all 3 coordinates X, Y, and Z like this. So this is at a position vector R2. And like this, I have a system of many particles. Then the position vector of the center of mass of the system with respect to the same origin, that will be given by the formula that it is summation m into r for all the particles going from 1 to n divided by the total mass of the system, which is summation m 1 to n. Okay. So basically what this formula means is that we are executing this summation in the numerator m1 r1 as a vector plus m2 r2 plus this series continues till the last particle, and then in the denominator we are just adding up the masses. So once again you can see that it is the weighted mean. So RCM is the weighted mean of the individual positions. Okay, and the weightage is given to mass. So that is the general idea of position of center of mass. Okay, so note this down and let's work out a quick typical type of question. So we have 3 particles. A. which is of mass 10 kilograms at P, which is of mass 5 kilograms, located at and C, which is of unknown mass at so we have these three particles A, B, and C in the XY plane. Find the mass of the third particle and the x coordinate of the third particle if the system center of mass is at the origin. Okay, so this three particle system has its center of mass at the origin. Then what should be the mass of that third particle and what should be the x coordinate? The first two particles we know everything about. We know the masses and the exact position, but the third particle, the mass is unknown and the x coordinate is unknown. But the y coordinate is given as minus u. Okay, and the condition is that the center of mass should be at the origin. So what are these two unknown quantities? Okay, so we work this out. So देखो यहाँ पे there are two unknown quantities, so we need two equations. Yes, very good, Adinath. So how we'll get the two equations? We will use this formula above only, but this formula can be converted into scalar equation. That x coordinate of the center of mass is summation mx divided by total mass. Okay. Y coordinate of the center of mass is summation my divided by total mass. So we'll need only these two in this case because it's a 2D system, not a 3D system. But in general, for a 3D system, the individual z coordinate becomes summation mz divided by summation m. Now, in the below example, the summation is over only 3 particles. Okay, but what about the xcm and ycm? They should be 0. Both of them should be 0. So that means summation mx should be 0. So m1 x1 plus m2 x2 plus m3 x3 should be 0 for the 3 particles, and same for ycm. So we'll get two equations from that, and we'll get the two unknowns. Okay. So that's how we have to deal with this particular example. Okay, so here the condition for the center of mass to be at the origin is that xcm should be 0, and along with that ycm should be 0. Now the condition for xcm to be 0 is that summation mx is 0. So basically ma into x coordinate of a plus mb into x coordinate of b plus mc into x coordinate of c should be 0. That's our first equation, and again summation my should be 0. So we'll get a similar type of equation that will become a second equation. Okay, so let's solve these two equations. Let's see what we're getting. So 10 kg into 2, that's maxa, okay, plus 5 kg into minus 1, that's mbxb, plus unknown mass, okay, into unknown coordinate. So two unknowns in this equation is 0. So what this is giving us? 20 minus 5. Okay, so minus 15 plus mc xc should be 0. So obviously mass cannot be 0. So that's telling us that the x coordinate of c is a negative quantity. Okay, which is obvious because two of them are at a positive position. And so this is from equation 1. Now from equation 2, what we'll get? ma into y plus mb into yb plus mc into yc should be 0. So this one you'll see will directly give us the mass because we know the y coordinate of this one. So 10 into 3 plus 5 into 5 plus the unknown mass but into minus 8 is equal to 0. So what this is giving us? 30 plus 25. So 55 minus 8 times mc is 0. Okay, so this is giving me the mass, and from the above I'll get them. So mass of this one is 55 by 8. So that is almost how much? Almost 7, a little bit less than 7. Okay, 6.8 something. Yeah, and directly then substitute. Okay, so xc will become 15 by, sorry, this is plus 15, no, my mistake. Okay, 20 minus 5. Okay, so it will be minus 15 divided by mass of c. So x coordinate of this one will become minus of 15 into 8 by 55. Okay, so this will become the x coordinate, and this is the mass. The mass is in kgs, we know, but the unit of x we don't know because that unit is not given to us, but whatever it is. So understood, a simple type of, okay. Okay, now let's look at another example where we understand a little bit about displacement and motion of the center of mass. Okay, so in our next example, if we have our situation where we have one particle of mass 2 kg which is at rest at the origin. Okay, and now we have another particle which is of mass, let's say 3 kgs, okay, at x equal to, let's say 10 meters. This is the position at t equal to 0, but it's moving at a uniform velocity. Okay, and that velocity is, let us say, 2 meters per second. So this is moving at a uniform motion. Okay, whereas this one is at rest. So this is the situation at t equal to 0. So now we want to find the position of the center of mass at t equal to 0. Then find the position of the center of mass at t equal to 5 seconds, let's say. And from that, find the displacement of the center of mass in 5 seconds. Okay. And then in general, we will find the displacement of the center of mass and the velocity of the center of mass as functions of time. Okay, so from this, we'll get an idea of how to do this. Okay, so just try this out. So we can do this just by using the definition of center of mass to begin with. The second particle is having a uniform motion along the x-axis. What's the answer of the first part? Just use the formula m1x1 plus m2x2 divided by m1 plus m2. So how much is coming at t equal to 0? Just write it. Just work it out. Okay. Yes, Adinath is correct. Yeah, first one, 6. The next one is 2 into 0, and 2x2 is 3 into 10. So 0 plus 30 is the numerator divided by the total mass, that's 2 plus 5, 2 plus 5. So 30 by 5, so it's at plus 6. Okay, now after 5 seconds, where is that second particle located? Velocity into time is now 2 into 5, 10 meters. So it's gone 10 meters further. So we are x equal to 20. Okay, so now where is the center of mass? Center of mass. How much? 65 by 12. So while the particle has gone from 10 to 20, but because the first one is remaining stationary, the center of mass has gone from where? From 6 to 12. So the displacement of the center of mass is only 6 meters. Whereas the displacement of that particle is as much as 10 meters. Now we have to convert this into a function of time. That at any general time t, okay, what will be the displacement of the center of mass? And therefore, what will be the velocity? Velocity you can get by differentiating the displacement. Yes, very good, Adinath. That's correct. Okay. So the velocity of the center of mass will be plus 1.2 meters per second along the x-axis. It will be a uniform velocity. Okay. And therefore, the displacement as a function of time will be 1.2 t. So first of all, we can see that at t equal to 5 seconds, this particle has reached here. It has reached displacement of v2 into t, so 10 meters. Okay, so it's reached x equal to 20 meters. So the first part's answer, xcm is equal to 2 into 0 plus 3 into 10 divided by 2 plus 3. So that's 30 kg meter in the numerator divided by 5 meters in the denominator. Sorry, 5 kg. Total mass is in kg in the denominator. So xcm is equal to plus 6 at t equal to 0. So therefore now we can see that at t equal to 10 seconds, the position of this one is the initial position. Okay. Plus the displacement. Okay. It's 20 meters. So now using so you can see that at 10 seconds, xcm becomes 12 meters. So therefore we can see that from 0 to 10 seconds, the displacement of the center of mass will be 12 meters. Sorry, will be 6 meters. Yes, very good, Vansh. So now we can just generalize this, that you can see that at any general time t, the first particle's position is 0, but the second particle's position becomes 10 plus 2t. The final position becomes the initial position plus velocity into time. We are using this formula. Okay. So center of mass's position so displacement of the center of mass is 1.2 t. Yes. So velocity of the center of mass, which we can get by differentiating the displacement with respect to time, or we can just differentiate the position also with respect to time, because it means one and the same thing. Okay, people. So this is how we can track the motion of the center of mass if one or more particles within our system is in motion. Okay. And this is going to be very important because we look into situations like collisions and all, where we have to track the motion of the center of mass. Okay, so people, that's where we conclude today's lecture. Next time we will look more into motion of center of mass for the general n particle case. Okay, and through that we will look at how to apply Newton's second law for a system of particles. Newton's second law for an individual particle we've seen is that net force is equal to rate of change of momentum. But when it comes to a system, we'll see that it will convert like this, that it is the net external force internal forces do not affect the momentum of the system. So net external force on a system will be equal to the rate of change of its momentum. Okay. So we'll first see what is the definition of momentum of a system in terms of the velocity of its center of mass, and then we'll see how to apply dynamics. Okay, we'll take it from there, and we'll also start looking into center of mass of continuous mass systems instead of discrete mass systems. So there the summation is replaced with integration, because you divide the mass of the system into dms, individual small chunks which are continuously distributed. So that summation becomes an integration, because instead of individual locations, they're continuously spread now. Okay, so there's an important application of integration there. All right, so that's it for today's session, people. Wish you all the best. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir. Bye, sir.
Okay, and start attending offline lectures more when you can, people. Today we had offline online at Nerul, so people who are living close by to the Nerul center. Okay, the days we are having lectures
Sir,
here,
it
please.
wasn't in this schedule में लिखा नहीं था नेहरू में.
Achha, it was not written. Okay, so next time what I'll do, whenever I have this offline session, online, offline, I will post on the Red House and non-integrated group before a day before. Okay.
Yes, sir.